But I hate my life. That's your choice. You don't have to hate your life. You've chosen to hate your life. And if you actually hated it properly, you'd fix it. There's no reason to stay the way it is. It's fixable. Oh, yeah, it's easy for you to say. Why do you think it's easy? I worked hard. I mean, I'm 62 years old. I can say this different. When I first started ministry, I was 35 years old. Very different. I can't say what I can say now. I've worked very hard on me. And there's been times when my life wasn't what I wanted it to be. But I always understood that I could change that in many, many different ways. I could change aspects of that. So can you. He's setting you free from the bondage of thinking you can't. All right, so today we're in Slavery to Freedom, Freeing Your Mind, Part 4. You know, it's funny. When I did the Heart of the Matter teaching, I hadn't expected, although I kind of expected that there would be an awful lot about the heart in Scripture, which is why I did the teaching. It turned out to be 64 parts. I knew there was a lot about the mind versus the flesh and all of that freeing your mind stuff and the enslavement of our mind and that kind of thing in Scripture. And it seems like every time I readdress, which I do that, by the way, while you guys are out here, I'm still readdressing, is there anything he's inspiring me to add or tweak in the teaching, right? And sometimes I'm like, can we make this go a little longer? I need more time. He's giving me all this good new stuff to just squeeze in to the teaching because there's so much of it. And you know, I've been hinting at this for quite a long time, talking a little bit about the idea of being slaves in our mind for a couple of weeks before we even started the teaching, which is why I said, why not just do a teaching on it, you know? So I hope this has been a blessing so far as we get into this whole understanding of the slavery of the mind. All right, so this is part 4. So first we're going to do the quick reset, right? So based on Exodus 6, right, where he talks about, I shall bring you out from under your burdens, deliver you from your enslaving, redeem you, and take you as my people. Okay, that was in Exodus 6, verses 6 through 8. So we've already covered some of this. Okay, I shall bring you out of from under your burdens. We talked about the idea of his opening your bubble, right, your delusion space, the way you see the world, to the possibility of a way of escape and cause you to seek it. Now, I want you to really seriously get something out of this because I want to say I made the mistake. I did like a lot of you do. I mean, on a Saturday morning or whatever, you might go and turn on looking for anything on YouTube that somebody else is doing live. And it just makes me, I don't even know what the right word is, but I'm just disappointed, we'll use that word, to just hear the continuous Christianized, God's doing everything, we're praying that he just does everything. It's like there's never any part of it that's on me to do when they speak. And I get so disappointed because those people listening to that and buying into that will never get there. Because he didn't put you here to do everything for you. What would be the point in that? Okay? What would be the point in that? See, some of you, and by the way, as a parent, some of you are making that same mistake. You're just way coddling your children and not just putting them out there. Oh, but they'll cry. Good. My mother never cared that I cried. Okay? All you Gen Xers, maybe late boomers, your parents didn't care if you were crying. Go over there and cry. I don't care. Okay? Because you needed to learn to stand for yourself, to pull away from mama's leg, you know, okay? Apron strings, whatever way you want to look at it. And Abba's the same way. You will not grow until you have the responsibility over yourself. And then you are responsible to make the choices. Remember, I did that teaching, right? Making decisions is the reason you exist. I said it's called making decisions, the reason you exist. That's why you're here. But if you are constantly thinking that they're made for you, done for you, everything's outside of you, how are you going to grow? Okay? One of the greatest things I think my mother did when I was first born is that she was one of the first of her friends in a college age, to have a kid. And so everybody got to hold the baby. I didn't actually get overly umbilical cord attached to my mother. I mean, I was attached. It was my mother. I knew the difference. But I was completely comfortable to not be always with her. Because everybody was like, pass the baby. We want to hold the baby. We want to hold the baby. And so I think it's actually very healthy for the children to get away from their parents. Sometimes the parents don't realize it's not the child, it's you that's the problem. We had this thing, I'm not throwing my wife under the bus here, this is, because it's a mom, but when my son first was going to go to public preschool, like a Jewish preschool we sent him to in Florida, she was all afraid that he wasn't going to be okay. I said, no, when he goes into the classroom, you're the one who's not going to be okay. I said, so I'm going to drop him at school because you're going to have the problem, my baby. All right? Okay, understand that God is the best parent. The Father is the best parent, which means he allows you, everything is open to you to do. He allows you, okay? You got to do that with your own children, too. Some of you still got your 35-year-olds living in your basement. Are you kidding me? But they can't live on, then they, throw them out. They'll figure it out. And you would think I'm being so cruel. No, I told both my children, I said, 18 and you're out. I said, you can stay as long as there's a proof that evidence that what you're doing is working towards out and not on a 10-year plan, okay? So if you've got a reason that I can agree with, then you can stay as long as I see you actually doing it, because that'll get you out more successfully, right? Do you understand? And again, I'm trying to say all of this. I'm not trying to pick on everybody. I want to give you the right perspective of Yah. You can only grow up to a certain point in your parents' house. If he's doing everything for you, it limits your growth. Do you understand that whole point, right? A child living in the parent's house can only grow to a certain point because they're not responsible for a bunch of stuff because mom or dad's going to take care of it. That burden is not there. So that's why I keep trying to help you understand. God's not the way you thought he was. He's better. You're thinking, how could he be better? Because if you understand him the correct way, you'll understand why in his not doing for you, that's better. You thought he was great when he helped you and saved you and delivered you. And he's even better when he doesn't. Whoa. Meditate on that. When he doesn't jump in there, he's being even better. He knows your limits. He knows what you can handle. He knows when he should and shouldn't. But he doesn't because you need and will grow by him not jumping in there. And this is not what you're ever going to hear from most Messianics, and certainly not on Sunday. Oh, we're just going to be, the Father's just going to take care of it. He is not going to do all of that stuff. You know why? Because he's a great parent. Okay, if he was not a great parent, he would do all those things. He's a great parent because he doesn't want you to stay a child. And that's part of when you still act like a child in an adult world, you're in the futility of your mind. You're just walking around, and that's why we have so many depressed and frustrated young people, because nobody forced them to grow up. And so they all act entitled and enabled, and they all have all kinds of everything in the world, like, I'm tired, I'm this, You know what's so funny? Is when I hear people below the age of 70, I'm tired. They're like 20 years old. What are you tired? I don't think I slept between 20 and 30. What do you mean I'm tired? Well, I didn't go to school because, I went to bed at like 3 in the morning, went to school at 5. Because I had to get up, get on a bus, get on a subway, in the snow, both directions, the whole 9 yards. Okay? Barefoot. No, but seriously, I had to, because I was in the band, I had to be there at 8. I had to go from Queens to Manhattan, and I had to get on a bus and then 2 trains. Okay? I had to go on a subway and then change into another one. But my rhythm, my sleeping, my clock hasn't ever changed. I still went to bed at 2, 3 in the morning. And I got up on 3 or 4 hours sleep, and I went, and it got it done. And I learned how to push through and do what has to get done, because it had to get done. Nobody was there to coddle me. My mother said, you're getting up and going to bed, going to school, whatever it is, you're going. But some of you are like, oh, I feel bad, you're tired, stay home. Let's not do that. Abba's not going to do that for you. Something comes up and right in your path, and you're like, oh, I'm too tired to deal with that. He's like, too bad, it's there. You got to overcome. You're going to have to persevere and get through. He wants you to know something that a good parent helps a child know. You're stronger than you thought. You're more capable than you thought. You have more reserves that you can tap into than you thought. You're more resourceful than you thought. See, you won't know this until you're forced. Okay? Until you're forced to push through and see what limits you really have, you won't know. You won't know. It's like I told you, it worked out that my son needed me when he was really little. He was trying to put something together, and I said, I'll be with you in a minute. Next thing you know, I got 3 phone calls, and it was more than a minute. By the time I got to him, he'd already finished it. He had the ability. He didn't need me. By the way, had I gone to him earlier, I would have done the same thing that happened when I didn't go to him. I looked at him and said, what's your problem? Why are you struggling? Well, what does it say in the instructions? I would have talked him through doing it himself anyway. But as it is, he figured it out. I don't think you give yourself enough credit because you've been taught to use God as a crutch. Okay? Stop using him as a crutch. That's not what he's here for. He's not a crutch. Okay? This is all the stuff that's happening up in here. All right, so let's get back to my notes. So he opened up your mind. Let's say he gave you the red pill to realize there is a possibility of something more, something else, something's missing, something you need, okay? A way of escape out of the whatever nonsense you're living in, okay? You know, in Matthew he says, come to me all who labor and are burdened, I'll give you rest. Now, Christianity will say, he will now take your burdens and you're just gonna do nothing. No, I'm gonna show you the way to handle your burdens and find rest. You're going to do the work. All right, he says, I shall deliver you from your enslaving. I'm going to cause you to seek the cause of your enslaving. Now, that wasn't hard for Israel. They were enslaved by Mitzrayim. They were in Egypt. They were slaves. Physically, they knew why they were slaves. But when he brought them out, they had to deal with the fact that they were still up here enslaved. That's why they kept saying things like, oh, it was so great back there in our slavery. Why'd you bring us out here where we have to struggle? Some of you have children. You kick them out of the house or you get them out there and then they want to come right back in. Why do you let them back in? They're out. They come back to you because they think they can. When they're out, you tell them, unless it's absolute emergency, then you can come back for like a very short time. I'm not your safety net here that way. You're an adult now, just like I was an adult. Figure it out. That's the whole point. Okay, you have to prepare them. What if something happens to you? Are they prepared now to take care of themselves? All of you who are coddling your 40-year-olds and your 35-year-olds in your house, what if something happens to you? What are they going to do? How are they going to take care of themselves? Some of you send your kids out of the house. They don't know how to cook. They don't know how to clean. They don't know how to do anything. Can't do their own laundry because you never made them do anything. My mother showed me how to do laundry when I was like 8 or 10 or whatever it was and never did it again. That was the end of it. That was her reaction to me saying, how come I ran out of socks? Oh, you have a problem with that? Here, make your own laundry. Okay? You take this, you pour it in, you pour this, you turn this on, push that button, boom, it's done. That was the last time she did my laundry. I did my own after that. All right, then she taught my brothers and my father, and my mother hasn't done laundry in 50 years. Now that my father's passed, now she does laundry, okay? But until he passed, she hadn't done laundry for 40 years. Okay? But that's the point, is that you have to make people, by causing them the opportunity to be able to learn how to be competent in this thing called life. Competent as an adult. To develop a high level of competency is the goal. Okay? So in Ephesians 4, we just talked about that. You should no longer walk as the Gentiles walk. You look at the world. They're all walking in the futility of their minds. They're all whining, complaining, victimized, and saying everything's fault is out there. Okay? If the fault's out there, the solution's out there. If the fault's in here, the solution's in here. Now, it doesn't mean that the fault has to be in here. Maybe something out there is causing a problem for you, but the solution still has to be in here because it's how you're responding to the fault that is your fault. That's your problem. How you respond to the issue, okay? But you've been enslaved in your mind to not think you can do all these things. That you don't have that freedom to do these things. Then in Philippians 2, we talked about let this mind or attitude be in you that was in Yeshua. You know, I think a lot of times we get back to where Christianity had the what would Jesus do? The WWJD, whatever. And we turned into what would Yeshua do, right? We turned into what would Yeshua do? Now, and what did Yeshua do? WDYD. What did Yeshua do? But I would rather you get to how would Yeshua approach it? What would his attitude be? This thing that I'm going through? What would his mindset be? What would his attitude be? Because out of that's going to be what he would do. Because what you do comes out of that. All right? Okay. Then he says, I shall redeem you. I know we're going over these things, but these things have to be re-hit and re-hit and re-hit. Because you've been so programmed by yourself, by the world, by family, by whatever, I got to break the programming. All right, I shall redeem you. Yahweh causes us to be aware of the redemption, reconciliation provided by Yeshua and why we need it. Now, provided by means it's available. It doesn't mean it's just there. Like, okay, you are now reconciled. He says, if you do these things, you're reconciled. Reconciliation is just sitting there waiting for you to do certain things. Redemption sitting there waiting for you. He did his part already. So then we get to, because of our walking in the futility of our minds and serving that which is not Elohim, this made us enemies with him. That's why we need reconciliation. We also need reconciliation because of being in trespassing all the time. So we were dead because of trespasses. We needed to be restored, redeemed, and reconciled because we had already earned death. And that was from Ephesians, right? Then we talked about doing the desires of the flesh and of the mind and of its thoughts is what got us in all kinds of trouble. That was in Ephesians 2. But in his compassion and graciousness, he delivered us from that by showing us a way out of it. Okay? Don't think Messiah just did something. He did something so that if you do something, it'll work. Pay attention, I'll say it again. He didn't just do something, and now it's all great for you. He did something so that what you do can bring the results you want. If he didn't do his part, whatever you did wouldn't matter. So his part is absolutely critical, okay? But he did it so that you could do something that would change your life. So you could do something that would bring a different result. So he didn't do anything for you, meaning stuff that you should do. He did it for you, meaning because I did this for you to benefit you, now what you do can benefit you. Let's see what else I got here. Let's see. So then in Romans, we were talking about this. We're going to lead now into where we're going to get to today. So in Romans 6, okay, we really started to understand Paul is talking about this two different elements in our system, this mind and heart emotion thing. There's two laws in our system, okay? The flesh, he calls it the flesh and the mind, all right? He says that the wages of sin are death, all right? So we know that if you sin, the wages are death, right, for that. He says that in this mind-flesh problem, there's a servitude problem. We serve either flesh or we serve the mind or spirit or righteousness. He says, do you not know that to whom you present yourselves servants for obedience, you are servants of the one whom you obey, whether sin of death or obedience to righteousness. So now there's sin, death, obedience to righteousness. Now obedience to what? Well, you were obeying, right? One way or the other, you're obeying. But he says when you obey the one, it's sin and death. You obey the other, okay, it's righteousness and life. So as he says that in chapter 7, that was in chapter 6, and in chapter 7 he says, I'm figuring this out. He goes, I get it. I see inside of me there's more than one law. And sort of, believe it or not, you're a law-abiding person. It may be the law in you, your own law, but you have your own rules and things you will or won't do. And that's what he's kind of saying here. He says, I see another law in my members battling against the law of the mind. What mind? The mind of Yeshua. Remember, this started with Philippians 2. He says, I see this other law, and it's bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members. This other law I submit to, I serve, I follow with, I abide by that law, and it's the law that leads to sin and death. It's the law of sin. So he's going to be using the word law. Please, I love this translation. Don't go by this translation's use of the word Torah in the New Testament, because sometimes it's wrong. Okay, the word in Greek is just law. Let's just leave it as law. Then you have to know which one of those two laws he's referring to at the moment. Okay? He says, so then with the mind, I myself truly serve the law of Elohim, but with the flesh, the law of sin. So you have two states you could be in. You could be in your mind, logical, rational, not in futility, irrational, illogical, or I could be in the flesh, which is all irrational, illogical, and emotional. One will lean in the direction of obedience and submission to the law of sin. The other will be in the law of righteousness, the law of life, law of Elohim. Okay? Now that we have that, let's go to chapter 8. Okay? Remember, he's laid this out. I'm just building this because guess where chapter 8 is after chapter 6 and 7. Okay? So this is all flowing. So don't forget. That's why I remind you. Don't forget what we learned in chapter 6 and 7. By the way, he also talks about this in 5 and 4. But we're building from chapter 6. Now, in chapter 8, in verse 7, we'll start there and then we'll go back to the beginning. Because the mind of the flesh is enmity towards Elohim. In other words, the way the flesh thinks. I know it gets confusing when the translation says mind and we were comparing mind to flesh. He's saying the way the flesh thinks is in opposition. Okay, we talked about being enmity, right? This idea of being in opposition or hostility towards Elohim. The way the flesh thinks is at least in opposition, if not actually hostility, in open hostility towards Elohim. For it does not subject itself to the law of Elohim, neither indeed is it able to. You can't serve him and submit to him when you're in your flesh. Why? Because by nature, the flesh is what? Me. I don't want to. I don't like that. I want this. Oh, I like that. And it doesn't subject itself to, is it right? Okay, the question, is it right, is according to, do you want it or not? In the flesh, is it right in the law of Elohim is according to, did he say it's okay? Did he say it's good? Did he say it's right? I like it. I've done it. It was good. In terms of the results I've perceived in my flesh, I'm going to keep doing that. As opposed to, did he say it's okay? Does he say it's right? Does he say it's good? So the mind of the flesh is enmity towards Elohim, for it does not subject itself to the law of Elohim. Remember, we're comparing the two laws. Neither indeed is it able. And those who are in the flesh are unable to please Elohim. So when you're in the flesh, you can't please him. Because what pleases him? Submission to his laws. Okay? He says that everywhere. You know, we did the teaching called Love and Torah. Everywhere you read about love in the Tanakh, it's connected to some level of Torah observance. You know, even Yeshua says, if you love me, guard the commandments. Okay? And so, let's go now to the beginning of the chapter. Verse 1, there is then now no condemnation to those who are in Messiah Yeshua, who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Okay, so we're going to break this down through the verses and what he's talking about. Let's disconnect our already pounded in understanding of what spirit means. Hopefully, I've reset that somewhat for most of you, in that it's talking about nature, a certain nature. Not nature like out in the woods. I'm talking about the person's nature. In this case, Elohim's nature, right? His intrinsic nature. He says, there's no condemnation to those who do not walk according to the flesh. That means that if you're walking according to the flesh, there's condemnation. Again, he's still continuing this. We have two laws. There's flesh and mind. And he's saying when you're in flesh, you're not of Elohim. You're showing yourself not to be of Elohim. He says, but when you walk according to the flesh, you're in trouble. There's condemnation. But when you don't, he says, if you are in Messiah, you can't be in Messiah while you're in the flesh. If you're in Messiah, okay, you're walking according to the Spirit. For the law of the Spirit of the life in Messiah Yeshua has set me free from the law of sin and death. I don't know how Christians, well, I guess I know how they get this messed up. Okay, let's follow this very specifically here, right? The law of the Spirit of the life of Messiah Yeshua. What's the law of the Spirit? The law of the intrinsic nature, the law of the nature of Yeshua, the life of Yeshua, the life that is Yeshua, the life that he brings is I am life. Right, John 14:6, I am life. He says that, remember, if I'm walking in it, verse 1, verse 2 follows verse 1. If I'm walking in, then I'm walking in the intrinsic nature of the life of Messiah, and that sets me free from the law of flesh, because you can't walk in both. Let me make this sort of clear for everyone, okay? I walk 95% spirit, 5% flesh, you're flesh. It might not sound fair, but that's the reality of it, okay? Because he says, I'm set free from the law of sin. But only if you are fully embracing the intrinsic nature of Messiah. Let this nature be in you. Let this attitude, nature, spirit be in you. Be like him in his nature. Follow this. That sets you free from being serving, right? We're talking about serving, that was in chapter 6, the idea of serving the law of sin. Because now I'm serving the nature of Messiah. I'm serving Elohim, the law of righteousness. He says, for the law, now this is really cool. Christians, pay attention. Nobody in the room, but the ones who are watching. For the law being powerless in that it was weak through the flesh, Elohim having his own son in likeness of the flesh of sin, and concerning sin condemned sin in the flesh. Which law is he talking about here? What law is powerless in that it was weak through flesh? The law of sin and death. See, Christianity reads this verse and says, the Torah was weak because we were flesh. And something was wrong with the Torah because we were flesh, and the Torah was weak. How do you get that? Follow verse 1, right? There's no condemnation to those who are in Messiah, who don't walk according to the flesh. For the law of the Spirit, I set you free from the law of sin and death. For that law being powerless, and that it was weak through the flesh, Elohim having his own son in the likeness of flesh of sin, and concerning sin condemned sin in the flesh. Watch this. So that the righteousness of the law of life, the law of Elohim, should be completed in us who do not walk according to the other law, the one of flesh, but according to the intrinsic nature of Yeshua. Which law is he talking about in verse 3? It can't be the Torah. That verse probably messed a lot of people up for years and years. What is it talking about here? How could the law be called weak? Because that law is weak. It's weak because it's a flesh law. There's no strength in it. Follow the flow. He's comparing two things. And he says, that law being powerless. Are we ever going to say the Torah is powerless? But he just said that when I embraced Messiah's intrinsic nature, I was set free from this weak, powerless law. Not the Torah. The law of sin and death. This has been going on for a couple of chapters now. See, but you're not going to hear that on Sunday. On Sunday, they're just going to go right to verse 3 and say, see, the Torah is weak. We see the word law, we got to believe it's talking about the Old Testament. Paul's being very clear here. I see another law in my members. He's not being typical Paul ambiguous. He's being straightforward. He says, there's another law. That's the one that's weak and a problem. And he spends the next 2 chapters explaining that. Now watch, okay? So that, listen, he says, so that the righteousness of the law, can he now be talking about anything but the Torah? I mean, what part of law is righteous but the Torah? Certainly we know the sin and death law that he talked about, the fleshly law, is not righteous. He's already made that very clear, okay? Okay, the Torah, I'm reading from the scriptures here, and it's wrong translation. For the law being powerless, the sin and death law being powerless, because it was weak, because it was fleshly, Elohim, having his own son in the likeness of flesh of sin, and concerning sin, condemned sin in the flesh. In other words, he overcame and beat it, right? He said he did that so that the righteousness of the law should be completable in us. In other words, he's given us the path to not be in the law of sin and death, but to be in the law of Elohim. He's shown us the difference. None of you, for the most part, maybe very few of you were raised in Torah, but I'm saying for the most part, 99% of you didn't understand any of this until the bubble was popped and you were drawn and you were shown. And then did you not come to realize, tell me if any of you has this problem, because I don't think one hand will go up. Did any of you really not realize how weak the law of flesh is? Like it really doesn't bear anything of any power? It's got strength over you because it's tempting, but weak meaning it can't give you what you want, ultimately. That's what he's saying. That law was weak. It was powerless. It was a delusion, illusion, a lie. Follow this, it gets better. He says, so that the righteousness of the law should be completed in us who do not walk according to the flesh. So this is now we're doing the other law, right? He's only talked about 2. So if we're not going to walk according to the flesh, we're now walking according to this other one, right? Okay, so for those who walk or live according to the Spirit, okay? Excuse me, I skipped a verse, okay? Who do not walk according to the flesh, but according to the Spirit. Not according to some ooey gooey thing. He's already told you what the Spirit is. It's the law of righteousness. Okay, we can go to the verse that says Elohim by definition is spirit. In other words, it's his nature we're referring to when we talk about the Spirit. We're not talking about some outside ghostly entity, ethereal entity here, okay? Which is what Christianity wants to embrace. But it doesn't say that. Now we get to verse 5. For those who live according to the flesh, he's still comparing the same 2 things. So there should be no confusion. Those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the matters of the flesh. But those who live according to the nature of Elohim set their minds on the matters of the nature of Elohim. It's so simple and been so convoluted and twisted, but it's so simple. Okay, let's make sure we're not losing this understanding, okay? Now, he says, for the mind of the flesh, okay, now when we talk about mind, he's talking about the way of thinking, right? He goes, let's go back to verse 5. For those who live according to the flesh set their way of thinking on matters of the flesh. But those who live according to the Spirit set their mind, their thinking on the things of the Spirit, the nature of Elohim. He says, for the way of thinking of the flesh brings death. That's death. You were dead in your trespasses because you were thinking in the futility of your mind like the Gentiles do. He says, but the mind or the thinking of the Spirit, the nature of Elohim, not some outside entity that comes and takes over you or some nonsense, okay? The mind, the thinking of the Spirit is life and peace. Let this mind be in you. You know, that's where it's line upon line, verse upon verse. He didn't say that in Romans, he said it in Philippians. But that's how you know, this is how you piece it together. He says, the mind of the flesh is death, the thinking of the flesh is death, but the thinking of the Spirit is life and peace. So if you don't have life and peace, your thinking is probably still fleshly. Ooh. It's your flesh that doesn't want to let go of the past. Do you know that your spirit can't be depressed? Your spirit, the Spirit. If your thinking is of the Spirit, you can't be depressed. You can't have anxiety. You can't have fear. All that negative stuff is the thinking of the flesh. It's the thinking of the flesh. Do you think Yeshua was depressed? Never. Had anxiety? Never. Okay? It's all flesh stuff. All right? So I'm not picking on you if you suffer from these things. Recognize that it's a mindset problem, a thinking problem, and you're still in your flesh. There's something you become addicted to in the pain. That's an actual psychological thing. You go talk to a therapist and you'll find out I'm right, okay? You can become addicted to victimhood. You can become addicted to the woe is me, or the attention that you get when you walk around and people try to make you feel better. I like the attention when people come over to me because they see I'm happy and going along and they want to get in along with that, as opposed to seeing me looking like a dead lump going, are you okay? You know, that upsets me when people ask me that. Not because they asked me or that they cared, it's because I somehow managed to look like I needed that. I don't want to ever look like I need that. If I'm in the right mind, I should never look like, are you okay? And so if I ever snap at you when you come over, yeah, I'm fine, get away from me. Because I don't want to recognize that I might be in that space. I got to fix that. I need you to go away so I can fix it. Because you can't fix it. No, I'm not being a wise guy. I want you to go away because you can't fix it. I have to fix it. So no, I'm okay. Do you need anything? No, I don't need anything. Not from you. I have to deal with this. And straighten me out and get my head on right. And then I won't need anything. Okay? He says, the mind of the flesh is death, and the mind of the Spirit is life and peace, because the mind of the flesh, listen now, it's going to explain this. Paul's making this so clear. This is like the most clear Paul ever gets. Okay? And still people misunderstand all this. He says, the thinking of the flesh, the mindset of the flesh is at enmity, hostile, and in opposition towards Elohim. For it does not subject itself to the law of Elohim. So what is it subjecting to? You're the servant to whom the slave to whom you serve. Still in Romans. Then you must be subjecting yourself to the law of sin and death, which is the law in your memory. That's you. In other words, really you could just switch it around to you're either going to be submitting to him or to yourself. And by yourself, I mean all those that you've allowed to influence you. Okay? That you've chosen to buy into and listen to create, that delusion. Look, some of you remember Pink Floyd, The Wall. The whole point was this guy was all depressed. He built this wall around himself. Okay? But that's kind of what we do is we build this delusion bubble around ourselves based on everything we take in from everybody else that we bought into. And then he has to pop a hole in it so the wall starts falling apart so you can see things correctly. But you found safety hiding behind your wall. All right. So let's again understand this. It says, this is because the thinking of the flesh is at enmity, in opposition, hostile toward Elohim. It does not subject itself to the law of Elohim, neither indeed is it able to. And those who are in the flesh are unable to please Elohim. Okay? All of you, I'm sure, if I would ask you or anybody would ask you, you say, I just want to please God. I just want to please Elohim. I just want to do what's pleasing in His sight. You can't do it while you're in your flesh. That doesn't mean that you can't do it in moments that you're not in your flesh. Just understand, as soon as you shift into flesh, you're not pleasing him at that point. Okay? That doesn't mean as long as you have some fleshly moments, you never please him. When you're doing the things you should do, that's pleasing to him. And then all of a sudden you kick into flesh and you're sort of outside the deal again. Okay? And that's where he's like, you guys need to kind of straighten this thing out. Okay. Let's continue. We got a few more verses. He says, but you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. Now, the next word is really, really important. He says, if. Okay, see, Christianity wants to say, oh, we're in the Spirit now, we're not in the flesh. Well, he says, if. If. If what? If indeed the ooey gooey, ethereal, whatever dwells in you. Is that really what it's saying? What's he been talking about all the way along here? This nature. He says, you are not in the flesh if indeed the nature of Elohim is dwelling in you. If you have aligned yourself and come into alignment with his nature, you've brought your nature into alignment with his nature. Okay? And if anyone does not have the spirit or the nature of Messiah, this one is not his. We all know the phrase, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, or you see a kid and goes, oh, wow, that's just like your twin, or, oh, that kid I could see you in that one, right? Because their nature matches yours in some way, okay? Someone looks at them, it could be a physical resemblance, but a lot of times it's a behavior. That child goes, oh, they're just like you. It's a nature thing. There's a part of them that aligns with that part of you, and they act like you. They've embraced a certain aspect, personality-wise, behavior, certain whatever things that they do that are like you. We should be visibly of his nature, where people can look at us and go, wow, you're just like your father. I'm not sure they can do that with most of us most of the time. I think we have our issues. We need to really be concerned about that, okay? I'm speaking about myself too. But there's times when we're not. We're looking more like, he would say, our father, the devil. The devil meaning, as we talked about in the Hasatan teaching, the idea of a mindset that's in opposition. A mindset of, I'm going to do what I want to do. You're a slave to whom you serve. Either you or him. Not the devil or whatever. You're serving you or him. But I hate my life. That's your choice. You don't have to hate your life. You've chosen to hate your life. And if you actually hated it properly, you'd fix it. There's no reason to stay the way it is. It's fixable. Oh, yeah, it's easy for you to say. Why do you think it's easy? I worked hard. I'm 62 years old. I can say this different. When I first started ministry, I was 35 years old. Very different, okay? I can't say what I can say now. I've worked very hard on me. And there's been times when my life wasn't what I wanted it to be. But I always understood that I could change that in many, many different ways. I could change aspects of that. So can you. He's setting you free from the bondage of thinking you can't. That's why I used the Matrix analogy for you last time. Where Morpheus is sort of just laughing and going, it's funny that you think that in this environment you have any limitations. This isn't a physical world I brought you into. This is a simulation. He's like, so why do you think speed, strength, or any of that stuff is limited in any way? Well, that's kind of where we are. We're in a world where we've been taught and enslaved in our mind that you can't. I can't. I know there are people that had good parents who said, I don't ever want to hear that word out of your mouth. Don't ever say, I don't want to ever hear I can't. Okay? And that's actually some good teaching from a parent. Okay? I don't want to hear I can't. There's a bunch of things that I can't do, and you know what I do? I can find someone who can. I can still get it done. So the fact that I can or can't doesn't matter necessarily. And sometimes I can't do it the regular standard way. Maybe I can work around and get it done anyway. But it has to be with possibility like a mind of possibilities. You have to be open to think in possibilities, okay? For all you cognitive function people, you got to build that NE, that extroverted intuition. You've got to be open to everything having possibilities. What ways can it be done? Well, I can't do this. Well, maybe I can't do it that way. But if I know it can be done, I just need to figure out how. How do I get it done? Okay? Continuing, he says here, you're not in the flesh, but in the spirit if the nature of Elohim dwells in you. All right? And he says, and if anyone does not have the nature of Messiah, then you're not his. So it's about his nature. It's not about just believing he exists. Believing that he died and was resurrected. Believing all this stuff, which is true. But that's not enough. You must embrace and align, bring yourself into congruence with his nature. Now, verse 10. And if Messiah is in you, the body is truly dead on account of sin, but the spirit is life on account of righteousness. He has not gone into a whole new realm here. He's still comparing flesh and the nature of Elohim. The body is the emblem of flesh. So he's saying, if Messiah is truly in you, you've aligned yourself, that nature is there, then the flesh is truly dead. It has no more authority. It's not dead. You didn't like drop dead. You're still walking around. But the authority of the flesh, you're submitting to the flesh, should have stopped. If Messiah is in you, the flesh, the body, truly dead on account of sin. In other words, the flesh should be dead because of sin. Because the flesh brings sin, which brings death. But the nature of Elohim is life on account of righteousness. What makes it life? On account of righteousness. So we can understand that flesh, body, sin is obviously doing the opposite of righteousness. Spirit, life, righteousness is the nature of the above. He's not changing anything about what he's been talking about now for a couple of chapters in this letter here. This is, you know what? A lot of people in the Messianic might try to avoid Romans. It's used so much by Christianity. I love what it says here. It is the problem you don't understand, which is the difference between what's going on in your head and what's supposed to be going on in your head. Okay? And the need to free your mind. Okay, so he says, and if the spirit of him who raised Yeshua from the dead, the spirit, the nature, right, of the one who raised Yeshua from the dead dwells in you. That nature dwells. Think about what we think about. We call a house a dwelling. Someplace you live in. Okay? So that nature is living, resident in you, not just somewhere in a little compartment and it happens to be inside of you, but like it's completely fills you up. I don't mean that again in that Christian sort of charismatic way, but like you have in your behavior, your thinking, his nature. It dwells in you. It's alive. When something happens, your thinking process is in line with how he would see it, how he would think about it, which leads to actions he would take. He says, if the spirit of him who raised him, Yeshua from the dead, dwells in you, he who raised Messiah from the dead shall also give life to your mortal bodies through his nature dwelling in you. You can look at this in two ways. One is being born again. Not the way Christianity teaches you, but now you have a new life in you. You were dead in trespasses, Ephesians 2. Now you're made alive. You could also look at this in the ultimate in terms of the first resurrection and being changed in a twinkling into eternal life. Because he says he did that for Yeshua, he'll do it for you. But he did it for Yeshua because of who Yeshua was and is. But if you become Yeshua-like, why wouldn't he do it for you? That's the point. He says, I do this for all that are like this. I did it for Yeshua. If you're like this, I'll do it for you. So we got to figure out how to be like this. Okay? All right, now, He will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit dwelling in you. So then, brothers, we are not debtors to the flesh to live according to the flesh. In other words, hey, you don't owe the flesh anything. You do not owe those traumas, dramas, memories, and all the other experiences and whatever cultural this and that and how you were raised and where you were raised and whatever other nonsense. You don't owe that junk anything. That's what he means by debtors. You don't owe it anything. Okay? Because he's saying, because of that debt, you think that you're obligated to live according to that. He says, no, you don't owe it anything. You don't have to live that way. You did, and now you could just say, done. We're not doing that anymore. I don't owe you anything. And you'll have family members get on you. Well, I want you to do this and this. Well, you used to do that. Well, I don't do it anymore. But you used to, so what? I'm not that person anymore. Okay? We used to come out and do this and that and this and that, drink and drugs, this and what. No, I don't do that anymore. What happened to you? I stopped dying and started living. Okay? I'm no longer walking in the futility of my mind. Stop saying, I became a Christian, or I became this, or I'm born again. No, just tell them what really happened. I came to realize I was dead and now I'm alive. Because I think differently. Because I've embraced a different nature. Okay? Well, how'd that happen? I came to realize there is a God. And he cares about me enough to wake me up and show me I need to change. He didn't change me. He made me aware of what he did and the path to life, and I chose it. Some of you are like, well, that's pretty cocky. No, he wants you to do that. Okay? Otherwise, we're back to why doesn't he just start with rocks? Okay? I mean, why is he bothering with us? Because he wants you to choose life. But he will give you an awareness of the choice. That's the key, right? He's going to give you an awareness of the choice. So he says, so then, brothers, we're not debtors to the flesh to live according to the flesh, for if you live according to the flesh, you are going to die. If you act that way, it only leads to death. He says, but if by the nature of Elohim, you put to death the deeds in your body. Now, see, if we read it according to Christianity, you can say, if by the Spirit you put to death. So this outside thing's going to come and do this thing in your body. No. If by your embracing his nature, you put, it does say that in there. It says, if by the Spirit you put to death. You. Like Philippians 2:5 says, you have to let this mind, you have to let this mind be in you. Right? He says, but if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds, so you stop doing the things you were doing that were according to the law of sin and death. You put to death the deeds of the body, you shall live. Okay, for as many as led by the Spirit of Elohim, these are the sons. We're going to talk about that more when he goes to I shall accept you as my people. We will come back to chapter 8 and start in verse 14 at some point. Okay? Where are we on time? Let's go to James chapter 1. I think, I'm hoping, I'm pretty confident that all of you have a new appreciation for Romans. Okay? And what it's talking about in terms of addressing what's going on inside this hard noggin of yours, right? Okay? Now, James chapter 1. Now remember, we're taking the same, this is where that layer upon layer, line upon line thing is. The same thing Paul was talking about. Look at the start in verse 8. He says, he is a double-minded man, unstable in all his, double-minded, two natures. James is talking about the same thing. This other idea of being double, it's because he says double-minded. What does that mean? Well, Paul told us what that means. The mind of the flesh, the body, versus the mind of the Spirit of Elohim, of righteousness, of the above, of Messiah. Let's go to verse 1. Yaakov, a servant of Elohim and of the Master Yeshua Messiah, to the 12 tribes who are in the dispersion. So it's to everybody. He's sending this letter out to everybody. My brothers, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Okay, so notice he never says anything about if it's because you're not praying enough and you're not whatever, that's why you're in trials. He's saying, no, there's a good reason for this. He says, my brothers, count it joy when you fall in various trials, knowing that this is personal development to strengthen you. So that you grow into Yahweh, to Elohim, to Messiah's stature. Knowing that the proving of your belief works endurance. Proving of your belief. By the way, who are you proving your belief to? Well, you're proving it to him. That's what most people would say. You're proving to yourself. I can do this. I'm in a trial. It sucks. But I can do this. So it strengthens your endurance through the various trials that do come on a regular, all too regular basis, right? Knowing that the proving of your belief works endurance. And let endurance have a perfect work so that you be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. So trials, again, parents who are sheltering your children from all kinds of, bubble wrapping them so they can't be experiencing any kind of trial. How are they going to develop endurance? How is it going to work so that they can be perfect, complete, lacking nothing? Notice that he said nothing about, I'm going to bless you so you have these things. I'm going to test you, torture you, whatever, put you through the ringer, because that's going to have you get to the place where you developed this so you can be perfect, complete, lacking nothing. Comes through trial. Go back to the baptism of fire teaching. I'm sure I covered this. Okay? Now, he says, if anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask of Elohim, who gives to all generously without reproach, and it shall be given to him. I think he threw that in there to say, in case you didn't understand what I just said, ask for wisdom. Okay? Because there's really no reason to bring that up at this point. He's saying, there's trials, count it joy, and you need wisdom to understand, I don't understand you. What do you mean count it joy? It's a trial. I don't like it. I want it to go away and stop immediately. He says, but it's what will bring you to that place where you're perfected, complete, lacking nothing. See, again, it's a mindset. What doesn't like the trial? The flesh, the body. The thinking, the thoughts of the body are like, make it stop. The mind of above goes, this is going to grow me. I need to figure out why he's letting me go through this, because he knows I can make it through, even though I don't know. Because he says no trial comes upon you that, doesn't have a way of escape or that's too hard for you to handle. I believe him. That's, again, part of the test is, do you believe him, right? Okay, he said it, I believe it. So the spirit mind, the mind of Messiah says, this is supposed to eventually lead to perfecting, completing, and lacking nothing. So I need to figure out what I'm supposed to be getting out of this that will make me more perfect, more complete, lacking less things. So that's a joy, even though it's not fun. So something can be a joy and not fun. It's kind of counterintuitive, but Okay? Now, so then he throws in this wisdom thing. He says to ask for wisdom, but he says, but make sure you're asking in belief, not doubting. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea, driven and tossed by the wind. For that man should not think that he shall receive whatever from the master. He's a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. What is he talking about here? The thinking process of the flesh versus the spirit. Right? Because if you ask a proper thing according to the spirit, but you doubt, why do you doubt? Because of the flesh. So there's a double mind. He says, don't ask while doubting, because you're not going to get anything. Or you're not going to get what you wanted. He'll give you what you need. It's not going to be what you asked for, because you don't believe. Belief is an above Yeshua mindset, spirit mindset type of thing. Doubt is a flesh below earthly mindset. I always tell you this. The whole book is the battle between belief and doubt, right? Right? That's the whole thing, is belief, faith against fear and doubt. Now, he says, and let the lowly brother boast in his exaltation, but the rich in his humiliation, because as a flower of the field he shall pass away. Okay, for the sun rose with burning heat and withered the grass, and the flower fell, and its pretty appearance perished. So also the rich man shall fade away in his ways. So what he's saying is, let's be careful that we don't get, thinking we stand lest we fall. It's just another prettier way to say sort of that deal, okay? Now let's see where he goes into verse 12. Blessed is the man who does endure the trial, for when he has been proved, he shall receive the crown of life, which the master has promised to those who love him. Okay, so he says there's a blessing in getting through the trial. He didn't say there's a blessing in asking for it to be taken away. Do all of you want to pray your trials away? Instead of praying for, how do I endure through? What do I need to learn out of? And then how do I grow to resolve this trial in whatever it's going to take? He says, blessed is one. Now this goes back to endure and receive the crown of life teaching. Okay, it comes from this verse. Now, watch what happens here at the end into this next section. This is again the mind problem, the thinking problem. Let no one say when he is enticed, I'm enticed by Elohim. For Elohim is not enticed by evil matters, and he entices no one. But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and is trapped. Is there no, the light bulb should all be going on. Wow, this is consistent everywhere. This issue is consistent everywhere. Each one is enticed when he's drawn away by his own desires and trapped. Then when desire has conceived, what kind of desire? Fleshly desire. He's not talking about the righteous, proper, spiritual desire. He's talking about the things that get you in trouble, right? He says, when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. So in other words, when the desire births action, okay? The mindset, the mind thought isn't the sin, okay? It's the action. So it's going to give birth to sin. And sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death, all right? Do not go astray, my beloved brothers. He's saying, pay attention. Don't miss the point here. This is all happening inside of you, which means that you are both the problem and potentially the solution. The thing of the above is the above will give you guidance in seeking the solution. The above isn't going to solve it for you. Do not go astray, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change nor shadow of turning, so you can depend on him. Having purposed it, he brought us forth by the word of truth for us to be a kind of first fruits of his creatures. So he brought us forth from what? Death. He brought us forth. We were dead in trespasses. I mean, this isn't Paul writing, it's James, but still, he brought us forth from death. So he brought us that how? By the word of truth. Yeshua is the word. John 1, the word made flesh. In the beginning was the word, John 1:1. John 1:14, and the word put on flesh and dwelt amongst us. We were brought forth by the word. The Torah is the word. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet. Thy word is truth. Psalm 119, verse 142 and 160. The entirety of the Torah is truth. The word is truth. So by that we were brought forth out of death. Okay? He says, having purposed it, he brought us forth by the word of truth for us to be a kind of first fruits. In other words, we're supposed to be a light, an example of this is what it looks like when you're brought forth from death. When he brings you out of death, this is what it looks like. He says, so then, my beloved brothers, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not work the righteousness of Elohim. So let's stop there and just kind of quickly handle this. So he says, my beloved brothers, don't just be quick to run your mouth and think you know everything and jump in and interject. Be slow. Listen more than you speak. Okay? He says, be slow to speak, slow to wrath, but swift to hear. Because, see, that's where, when people are just quick to speak and nobody's listening, usually wrath comes out of there. You talking, I'm talking, nobody's listening, and then eventually somebody gets frustrated, and the next thing you know, somebody gets upset. Now watch what he goes with this, all right? He says, for the wrath of man doesn't work, the righteousness of Elohim. Again, he says that mindset, that behavior pattern doesn't lead to righteousness. You don't do righteousness when you have that mindset. The mindset that brings righteousness is one that's listening more than it's running its mouth. And not just speaking. I mean, obviously I'm sitting here speaking for over an hour. It's not that. It's about in the situations where you are in an appropriate alignment with somebody where you should be getting instruction, you should be listening. Okay? If you're working, walking, or doing something with somebody who in a vertical kind of structure is above you, why are you doing more talking than them? If they're standing there near you and somebody asks a question, why are you jumping in instead of letting them answer the question? I watch this all the time and I'm thinking, it's amazing to me how often I have a husband and a wife and there's a conversation happening and she's answering everything and he never says a word. I'm like, you're standing right there. Why are you letting her just run, and you don't have anything to say? Not that she shouldn't say anything. I'm not saying that at all. Don't get me wrong. This is not some chauvinistic thing. I just want to know where his authority is and what he's actually doing, or is she the one wearing the pants and running everything? Okay? Is there a man in that house? A man isn't going to not let her speak, but it's going to be clear that he is in approval of what she's saying and that there's a proper structure there. Okay? Now, he says, therefore, what does that mean? In other words, because of everything I just said, because of all the stuff I just said about trials and sin and the mindset and all these other things and desires, therefore, put away all filthiness and overflow of evil and receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to save your lives. Oh, whoa. What's able to save your lives? The implanted word. Now, in case you're not sure what that is, give me another 2 verses. The implanted word is able to save your lives. Now, that doesn't mean that what Yeshua did didn't provide the potential for life, but you don't get to have that without the implanted word. It has to take roots in you and bear fruit. Watch what he says here. And become doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. So there's a word that requires action that he's talking about. And if you're not sure yet, go to the next verse. He goes, because if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man who looks at his natural face in a mirror, and he looks at himself and goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like, what he's like. In other words, you go and look in the mirror, that's a phrase that goes back, we say this all the time even today. Well, I don't know what the problem is. Go look in the mirror. Okay? That's basically what he's saying. You're the problem. Go look in the mirror. And you look in the mirror and you don't see it. You're refusing to accept that you're the problem. Okay? Some of you think that it's like you looked in the mirror and there's a big blemish somewhere and you say, no. He says, go look in the mirror because that's the problem. It's also the solution. I didn't take God out of the picture. You need to take that part that is from above and implant it and become a doer, not just a hearer. He says, because if anyone's a hearer of the word and not a doer, it's like the man who looks at his natural face in the mirror, for he looks at himself, goes away, and immediately forgets what he's like. But he that looked into the perfect law, so we know which law he's talking about, the perfect one, not the law of sin and death, not the law of the flesh, that of freedom, and continues in it. So he just called the law of above freedom. Church, all you Christians out there, your church has told you it's bondage. James just called it freedom. He says, and continues in it, not becoming a hearer that forgets, but a doer of the work. This one shall be blessed in his doing. In his doing. And by the way, it adds there of the Torah, of the law, but that's in italics. You're going to be blessed in your doing if your doing is based on the implanted word and in his nature. So you're not just going to be blessed only when you do Torah things. It's when you make choices that are in line with his nature, because not everything is listed in Torah that you do. but you do it in alignment with him. All those things, whether they're listed in Torah or not. If anyone among you thinks he's religious and does not bridle his tongue but deceives his own heart, this one's religion is worthless. Clean and undefiled religion before Elohim the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction and to keep oneself unstained from the world. I wanted to get to the last part, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Okay? In other words, that world is what's going to derail the right mind, the right, which law, which master are you serving? Okay? See, if you have the right nature, you'll care about the widows and orphans. If you have the right nature, you'll do these things in this way. If you don't have the right nature, we're gonna certainly have a problem there. We'll close with this, all right? At the end of Romans 7, it said, thanks to Elohim through Yeshua Messiah our Master. So then with the mind, all right? I know I said it last week so quickly at the end, but with the mind, I myself truly serve the law of Elohim. But with the flesh, the law of sin. Okay? He's recognizing that this is something we do with our thoughts, with our mind, with our intellect. Whether we're going to be logical or illogical, rational or irrational. Okay? He says, I came to realize that it's with my mind that I myself truly serve one or the other. Demons aren't making him do this, and God's not making you do that. What you're being is like what Moses was saying, right? You're having it laid out in front of you. Life, death. Choose life. Right? I started off at the beginning of this with the beginning saying he opened your bubble to the possibility of a way of escape out of the slavery of the mind. Are you going to embrace that escape? That's the question. Father, we come before you, and Father, we're just so blessed to get that we have this word, that you inspired people like Shaul to write the letter to the Romans, that we have the writings of James, that we have all these writings that we can line up and piece together to understand the growing that we need to do and where the areas are of growth that we need to do, and understand how this thing you gave us, this body and this mind, how they function and sometimes dysfunction. And we're just so appreciative that you give us, that you open us up to understand the path to freedom, to be free from slavery to sin, slavery to flesh, slavery of the law of sin and death, the worldly life, the futility of our minds. So, Father, we just so appreciate it. Please continue to be patient with us. That's all I'm going to ask is that for patience. Okay? And if we need to, get a little swift kick because we're getting a little too slow in getting along with it, come on now, let's go type of thing, go ahead and give us a kick. Okay? We appreciate that. Don't let us get complacent and slow in our movement forward because we need to get there. We know that. We appreciate it. We will find joy in those trials. So, Father, we thank you for all these things, and we appreciate it so much. And we're going to ask and come to you now in the name above all names, Yeshua our Messiah. Amen. Amen. Amen.